Welcome to Worldview Matters, discussing controversial issues, discerning current events, defending biblical Christianity. No topic off limits. And now, here's your host, David Fiorazzo.
Hey friends, thanks for tuning in, for sharing the podcast. Pastor Paul Blair is back with us. Before we get to him, though, I want to give you a website that you will need at least to share. That is ivoterguide.com, ivoterguide.com. And Biblical Voter, we're going to be talking about all this today because it's so important as we get Christians hopefully to the polls and get them informed and get them voting biblically. Emphasis on biblically, because anyway, we won't go there. So Paul Blair, Pastor Paul, Liberty Pastors, good to see you again, brother.
David, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, before we get into the topics and talk about all the voting issues and all the things that we need to do and we need to work on, I wanted to get you to give me a review of this brand new book that's on Amazon. You didn't know this was coming. There it is. Kamala, The Achievements of Kamala Harris.
I've heard
it. So, friends, this is a brand new book, and if you open it up, there's a video that I've seen go around. If you open up the book, it is blank. So The Achievements of Kamala Harris, there's many reviews, great reviews coming in. It says this book does a great job of condensing the public servant's life and her accomplishments without too much bias. Highly recommended. Great book and very informative. I can't wait to share it. This was a far more engaging and enlightening read than I expected, and shows how much she has done. Truly amazing. Once I picked the book up, I had to finish it in one sitting. And it's blank. So, Paul, let's start right there. This is a candidate, Kamala Harris. It's shocking to me whenever I hear the media lie or talk about the polls, how close they might be, that she's even got the amount of support that she does because they created this candidate. And it really is astounding. So your thoughts on whether it's her accomplishments or whatever you want to share off the top, go ahead.
Well, David, we have to understand it is clearly no longer Republican versus Democrat anymore. We are still under the delusion that we have two parties that are both pro-American. And when you consider that we have men like George Bush, who I voted for twice, and Dick Cheney, who at one time I thought was a good guy, when you've got the Bushes and the Cheneys out there who are Republicans, yet are endorsing Kamala Harris, who is a outspoken communist, and quite frankly, she has proven not to be terribly bright. Well, how in the world could a true Republican come out and endorse Kamala Harris? And then you recognize that the battle is not between Republican and Democrat defending America. It's about globalism versus nationalism. And see, that's how you have a guy like Biden in there. We knew all along that the ship had sailed with Joe Biden 3.5 years ago. He has had countless examples on tape where he has just been checked out, doesn't know where he's at, unable to make a coherent thought. And of course, the media has covered for him. And then it got so embarrassing after the debate that they couldn't cover for him anymore. And then Kamala, who went from being an outright laughingstock by everyone for 3.5 years.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, she's a mix between Margaret Thatcher and Joan of Arc. And she's brilliant. And it's like, and they keep forcing this down our throats. Yeah. And see, that goes to show you the bureaucratic deep state doesn't care who's sitting in the president's chair, because they're going to make the decisions and tell him what to do.
That's right.
And there was a video I saw recently that I know is out there. It's easy to find. I should have mentioned it to you. But you've all Noah Harari, who is the mad scientist for Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum.
Yeah.
He was in an interview and he just stated clearly that if Trump gets elected, it will be, he stated, the end of the globalist effort. Obviously, it's not going to end. They won't go away. But it will severely hamper the globalist effort. So that's why you see this odd alliance between the George Bush brand of Republican, the Dick Cheney brand of Republican, and Kamala Harris. And that's why you see it doesn't matter who's elected as long as it's not Donald Trump. Because Trump, much like Reagan was, is an outsider.
Yep.
and it truly is there for the good of the United States and for no other interest. So that summarizes how we can have a cotton-headed ninny-mongers like Kamala actually on the ticket.
And by the way, friends, if you missed our interview with Trevor Loudon, he was on last week. Can Kamala Harris' communist roots be sanitized? And he got a brand new book out, Trevor Loudon does, called Stealth. Please look up that interview. But I remember Donald Trump already had a target on his back, Paul, and he goes to the United Nations and he gives a speech and he says, America will never be a globalist nation. Right. I'll never forget that. And so that's why they can't stand him. But there is something demonic because we know this is a spiritual battle. There's something irrational about the response to him, right? Would you care to speak to that? It is actually, you can tell it's spiritual, you can tell it's demonic because it is actually, they don't want to talk about policies. They can't. They just think he's evil and he is a threat to democracy. Yeah. They're accusing him of the very thing that they are doing. Go ahead.
Yeah, we're going to weaponize the Department of Justice. Hello, who's done that for the last 3 years? Jeez. And we all fail to remember, or we don't, but some choose to. Trump was president. 4 years ago, I believe the election was stolen from him, and he left office. He didn't burn things down as he was going out. He tried for a peaceful transition of power. So when they're saying, oh, if Trump gets elected, he's going to arrest everybody. Well, he didn't arrest Hillary 4 years ago, and quite frankly, he probably should have, but didn't. So the accusations are just pure nonsense. And what doesn't make sense, David, is these guys, I tell you, if you would have asked either one of us 15 years ago whether Donald Trump was a conservative Republican or whether Elon Musk was a conservative Republican or any of these, there are so many out there now that, 15 years ago were outright liberal Democrats and quite frankly were walking on the other side of the street. And now they're considered conservative, many of them coming to Christ, many of them at least considering Christ and moving in that direction. It's amazing that the establishment and Hollywood has turned against Donald Trump when just 10 years ago, he was their fair-haired boy. So I agree with you. I think it is demonic. When you consider the depths of what's going on in our society right now, when you consider that we still don't know who was on Epstein's travel logs. I mean, it's like, what's going on? Yeah. Because it seems like everybody in D.C. has either been bought or bribed or threatened or blackmailed. And it seems they have that kind of control inside the Beltway. I think there's a connection. Now we see P. Diddy and whatever is going on in his world. But I think the Hollywood establishment, I think the bureaucratic establishment of the deep state, I think there's a reason they all, whether they're Republican or Democrat, almost all of them are singing out of the same hymn book. And I agree with you, David. I think it's got demonic roots. Because when you think about what's going on with child sex trafficking and the murder of innocent children, and they want to call it a woman's right to choose, nonsense. A woman's got a right to choose whether she's going to sleep with a man outside of marriage or not, or whether she's going to take some sort of preventative measures to keep from getting pregnant. But once she's pregnant, she is a mother, and she is either going to deliver a dead baby or a live baby. And that is not part of her body. That is another body that is temporarily inside her body. And to snuff out an innocent life, well, we all know what that's called. That's right. So purely this goes back to the demonic roots of the worship of Chemosh and Baal and Ashtaroth in the Bible, where they would take these precious babies and throw them in the fire. Yeah. We do the same thing. We just can't hear the baby screaming because we do it inside the mother's womb.
That's right. Molech in the Old Testament. Yep. Paul, you bring up a very important point, and I try to hammer this home a lot. The media will try to make this election about personalities, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, but we have to go back to policies, platform, and procedures. So friends, I want to direct you to biblicalvoter.com, biblicalvoter.com, and they put together a wonderful comparison of the party platforms. So you've got very simple, in columns, the Republican on the left, the Democrat on the right, which is interesting. They kind of have that flipped. I'm kidding. But they go through the major issues: life, marriage, parental rights, education, the border, Israel, First Amendment. And Paul, could you comment on this, and then we'll just keep moving?
In every issue, Ephesians 5:11 tells the believer to have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness. That word fellowship, if you look in your lexicon, could also be translated as a part of, excuse me, or a party to, or quite frankly, a member of a party that endorses the unfruitful works of darkness. We've got abortion, we've got LGBT confusion, trans mutilation of our children, trying to confuse the innocent children as early as 2 or 3 as to whether they're actually boy or girl. We've got the pressing of the attack on private property rights. And remember, it was God that established the free market and private property. When you look, when Israel was delivered out of 400 years of bondage in Egypt, God told them that when they got to the promised land, they were going to have their own property and to respect the property rights of others, not to covet somebody else's property, not to steal someone else's property. So all of this is biblical. So you've got one side that promotes the murder of babies, that promotes LGBT perversion, that promotes trans mutilation, and promotes communism. Well, obviously, you cannot call yourself a follower of Christ in your politics and vote for the Democratic ticket. I mean, it's opposite of each other. And quite frankly, we're told not just to come out from it, but we're told to reprove it, to expose it, and to stand against it. So we, at the very least, and I was with General Flynn not too terribly long ago, and he made a statement that I didn't even realize was true. He said that 40 million Christians didn't vote in 2020. And I can't imagine that when you look at the overwhelming majority of history, most people did not have the privilege of being self-governing. And here we are in the United States of America, and we're the only Christians in history that haven't been persecuted for our faith because of the Christian foundation of our country. And we have 40 million Christians enjoying the blessings of liberty that choose not even to vote. My goodness, we are guilty of forfeiting our stewardship responsibilities if we can't even register and get out and vote biblically. And that's why biblicalvoter.com is so important.
We don't have time to get into this, but I talked to George Barna last week, and we've got to put a lot of Christians today in air quotes, unfortunately, because of the declining biblical worldview. So people that profess to be Christian, even though they might lean conservative, but we still need to get them out to the polls to vote. But Paul Blair, you've been preaching some election sermons at your church. Yeah. So you have the audacity to talk about politics from the pulpit? So give us the website and for your church so people can check that out.
Well, if you go to libertynetwork.live, libertynetwork.live is our new website. We've just rebranded, but you can find both our Oklahoma congregation, our Orlando congregation, then also Liberty Pastors on that website. Just go to the Edmond or the Oklahoma congregation. You'll find all of our sermons and things listed there. And you can find last week's sermon. We're going to be doing a series of election sermons over the rest of this month. Last week, we just talked about what's at stake. In fact, I preached largely from Ephesians 5, and then also touched on Joshua 24. Well, just before he died, he told the leaders of Israel, choose you this day who you will serve. Are you going to serve the gods of the Canaanites, or are you going to serve the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? And quite frankly, worshiping God is not lip service. It's not making an empty commitment or just repeating a creed. Christianity is relational. We are followers of Christ. We submit to the lordship of Jesus. And David, just as you joked a moment ago, we open every one of our camps on opening night. We ask pastors this question: what part of your life is Jesus not the Lord over? And we let that sit for a minute because everybody knows the answer. We know he's the Lord of all. Well, how can we say on one hand that Jesus is Lord of all and then say, I can't speak about that subject in church? They contradict. Either Jesus is Lord of all, and we can speak about everything from a biblical perspective, or Jesus isn't Lord of areas of my life, and that is off limits in church. Most pastors have been taught wrong, and they've never thought about it.
That's right.
And when they do, they go, aha, I've been deceived. I will teach. I will make 24/7 disciples. I will make disciples of my congregation where they honor God in every facet of their lives.
Yeah.
And those that won't are hirelings. The only reason they will not do that is because they're afraid they're going to lose some members or it's going to hurt their offering. And at that point, they have ceased to be a God called minister or prophetic voice, and they have chosen to be a hireling, just looking for a paycheck, trying to run their little religious business.
Yeah, seeking the approval of man rather than God. And we've got a lot more coming up with Pastor Paul Blair on Worldview Matters. We'll be right back.
Today's show is brought to you by Harbinger's Daily, world news biblically understood. Stay informed at harbingersdaily.com.
Be sure to follow us on Rumble. Our viewership is increasing monthly thanks to you, and praise God. Also, if you can download the free app on your iPhone for Freedom Project Media, that is available. Pastor Paul Blair, I got an email from another troublemaker for the Kingdom of God, Dr. Rick Scarborough, and early voting in Texas is October 21st. My goodness. So we've got to have a little sense of urgency here, don't we?
Right. Well, we're there. I think in some states, I think absentee ballots have already been sent out. So really, as odd as it is to think about, where we used to have an election day,
Yeah.
as a matter of fact, that's codified in the Constitution. Now we have an election season, and we've got ballots going out. We've got some states like California that are fighting like crazy to keep from having to check IDs on people that vote. And of course, you can vote, go in and vote early, or quite frankly, we need to treasure the importance of this, make it a national holiday. I mean, there's nothing more important than getting out to vote in a constitutional republic, and having the idea that you can just do paper ballots and mail them in. I tell you what, that leaves open room for fraud. David, I think of it like this. You can't get on an airplane without showing your ID.
That's right.
If you want to go buy some allergy medicine, and down here in Oklahoma, down in the wind gets going, you got to go buy generic Sudafed. Go down to Walmart pharmacy, and it's like $5.95. But to buy this over-the-counter generic Sudafed, you've got to show them your driver's license, sign 2 legal documents, and then they will allow you to buy this $6 item. I think voting ought to at least be that difficult. And if it's not racist to cause you to show your ID to buy generic Sudafed, it shouldn't be considered racist to expect someone to show an ID and prove that they're actually a citizen and who they claim to be before they cast a ballot in this greatest country that's ever lived.
So in this email I got from Rick Scarborough, I just want to share, he's got a good idea here, Paul. He said they recommend that iVoterGuide.com, that churches will use the party platform comparison in the church services, and he recommends them on Sunday, October 20 and October 27, use those graphics from iVoterGuide.com so you can see the stark contrast between the Republican platform and the Democrat.
Yep.
I think that's a great idea. A lot of churches won't, but hopefully more will catch on.
iVoter Guide, excellent. And as you mentioned a while ago, if they go to Biblical Voter, which iVoter Guide is actually listed on there, iVoter Guide, great people. Debbie Wuthnell, great folks. But there's a bishop named Art Hodges, a great warrior out of California. Art actually wrote a little booklet. Quite frankly, it's a sermon that contrasts the two parties. I think you can find that on those websites, and I would recommend that any pastor that's curious search the websites. I'm sure there's a PDF of it online.
Okay. The other thing is, you mentioned Debbie Wuthnell. I've had her on the show before. She's the president and CEO of iVoter Guide. And recently, I want to get your response to this, Paul. Mark Zuckerberg, Meta CEO, founder of Facebook, apologized for censoring conservative content leading up to the 2020 election, and he admitted to being pressured by the Biden administration. So speaking of communist policy, but now iVoterGuide.com is having their content suppressed right now on Facebook. She says their posts are being removed for violating community standards. So when you censor or suppress a certain group or information and you put out your talking points or propaganda, and that's what's being put out, that, my friends, is communist policy in America. Paul, go ahead.
And one of the things, if you want to control someone's body, you can either overpower them physically, or you can point a gun in their face and say, do this or I'll shoot you, or you can gain control of their mind. And in every communist or totalitarian system, that's the goal. That's why every totalitarian system will nationalize education. They will start with those children of that next generation, and they will make sure and train them up to think along the party lines. The second way to control people's behavior is by controlling the flow of information. You know, David, as you and I are having this conversation, we're both in our offices. Neither one of us are eyewitnesses to what's going on in Florida. We have no idea what's really happening in Tampa or what the response is down there. We have to trust some means of media to tell us what's going on. And as a result, we will either be encouraged or we'll be angered. We'll either be pacified or we'll be infuriated. So the media has great ability to control your behavior. That's why in every totalitarian system, they nationalize the media. We have that in America. Now, the government doesn't own Facebook, but they control most of these social media platforms. They control all of the traditional media. And I'm sure you've seen it. But just this last week, there was a quote of John Kerry at the World Economic Forum, and then another of Hillary Clinton at Hillary's Institute of Paganism. I don't remember where she was speaking, but both of them bemoaning the fact that there is competition like you with Worldview Matters that provides alternative sources of information to the masses. They no longer control it through the New York Times and ABC, NBC, and CBS. You know, we aren't all sitting there waiting on Walter Cronkite to tell us what to believe, and that really hinders them. So yes, the suppression of information, they are trying to sway. That is election interfering right there. They've just admitted it once again.
Yep. So I'm going to give your website one more time. It's libertynetwork.live, correct?
Yep. Libertynetwork.live. Taking all these. That's our landing page for all of our ministries.
Okay, great. And friends,
there is Liberty Pastors. Go ahead. That was Liberty Pastors. Once you get to LibertyNetwork.live, you can click on Liberty Pastors. It'll take you to that page that you just saw there.
Yeah. And I just want to, plug this source again on my own website, 200 resources at my website, davidfiorazzo.com, for Christians, conservatives, concerned citizens, biblical worldview. I even did it in alphabetical order for you, over 200 resources. So please check that out and get informed, get the right sources. When you said earlier something like when you want to find out what's going on, you've got to trust some source of media. In this day and age, that is a frightening thought, knowing that for probably well over 50 years, the slant has gone so far leftward when it comes to those who are supposed to have the best interests of the people at heart and report to the people, but they don't anymore. They're agenda driven. But that's, I guess, for another show. We're down to 4 minutes already. Paul, tell us about anything, Liberty Pastors, what you're doing. I know you do the Riding the Storm Out videos, whatever you want to share.
Oh, you touched on something, David. Okay. For us to be a free people and retain freedom, we have to be moral, we have to be educated, and then we have to be informed. If we are going to be self-governing, those are necessities. We have to be moral. Of course, America was built on a biblical worldview. John Adams himself said our Constitution is made only for a moral and religious people. We've never needed 1 million police officers out there because we were all self-governing. We had a fear of God. We had good families. We were taught to make moral decisions. We had to be well educated. Amazingly, back in the late 1700s, something like 98% of the colonists could read. In fact, many of our founding fathers could read or write in 2 or 3 different languages by the time they were 6 and 7. Because their parents didn't sit them in front of an iPad and let them watch Sesame Street. They actually taught them and they showed these children how to live, and they were well informed. They could read far beyond the level that we can read, to be honest with you. And then the third thing is you have to be informed. Of course, that was one of the issues back in the time of our war for independence. There were free newspapers out there telling the people what was really going on, and King George didn't like that. Well, right now, we are not moral. We have become a pagan society. We are not well educated. Most our public education we know is there for indoctrination,
Yeah.
trying to make little transgender brain dead mutants out of these children rather than teaching them reading, writing, arithmetic, and the fear of God and love of country.
Yeah.
And then we're not well informed. So for those of us that are old enough that we got a decent education and were brought up with the fear of God, it's hard for us to find out what the truth is. So understand where we are under attack in all three of these areas. And we are incapable of self-government unless we are moral, educated, and informed. So that is what's under attack. And if we get to the point where there is a revolution in the streets or things just go to Hades, then that gives justification for the president to declare an emergency and send out. I tell you, in fact, my wife read to me last night that they either just passed or reaffirmed that the military can actually act against U.S. citizens in certain situations. I wish I'd thought about it. I would have documented that. But wow. Cindy showed that to me last night. And it's like, that is dangerous. Our founding fathers fought against a standing army. In fact, we didn't have one. We had militias at the state level, and then we had a Navy and Marines to secure our border. But it was a militia because a standing army could be used by a king to tyrannize his own people.
Wow.
And now we see this being talked about in our country, less than a month before the election.
There are so many issues, and we couldn't possibly cover a lot of them here. But Paul, we touched on a lot, I think. But when you said those things about what we need to be to preserve a free republic of moral people, educated and informed, I'm thinking all three. I'm going, man, my heart kind of sank a little bit, to be honest, because we're not there. But we are here for such a time as this. And as long as Christians are still on the earth and in the United States, there's got to be hope, right? One more minute. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Well, go to our website, get on Worldview Matters. And as soon as we get through this election, and folks, the sun's going to come up another day. If they steal this election, then we will be Christians enduring pressure. You know what? Christians have done it before, but we'll survive. God's not going out of business. But God willing, Christians will get out to vote. God willing, we'll have a fair election count, and Trump will get in office, and we will have 4 years of reprieve. And then we've got to get busy addressing those three areas that we just mentioned, David. And may God give us, if the Lord Jesus tarries for a while longer, I pray that we have another great awakening because we desperately need it.
Amen. Brother, thank you so much for your voice, all the great work you've done through the years. I was blessed to be at a couple of the training camps for Liberty pastors, and I love you, brother. I thank you for everything you're doing.
Love you, David. God bless you.
Appreciate your time. All right, friends, definitely check out Liberty Pastors and make sure to get brothers and sisters to vote. Please encourage them. It does make a difference. God bless you. And as always, keep speaking the truth about things that matter.